For our last story tonight, let's talk about the land where time seems to stand still. The land with a relentless sun and rippling sand. I'm talking about the Sahara Desert.
Something is moving beneath the Sahara. Not animals, not machines. When scientists listened to the desert floor, they picked up a strange rhythm. Soft, steady vibrations coming from deep underground. At first, they assumed it was an error, just background noise from shifting dunes. But then the signal grew stronger and stranger. Its pattern wasn't random. It repeated with a rhythm that looked almost designed. Now some experts believe the Sahara may be hiding more than sand and stone. It might be covering the remains of something massive, something built. And these silent pulses could be the first clue. The first vibration was so faint that the sensors almost missed it. A tiny pulse, buried deep under layers of scorching sand and ancient rock. The desert is always alive with small shifts, heat rising, dunes sliding, wind carving new paths, so no one paid attention at first. But then the second pulse hit, stronger, clearer, too clean to be random. That's when the team froze. Vibrations this precise don't just happen on their own out here. They ran the data again, checking every connection and every line of code. No errors, no glitches. The signal was real. A slow, steady beat coming from a depth where nothing should be moving at all. Almost as if something down there was trying to call out. What made it even stranger was the shape of the vibration. Natural tremors scatter and twist. This one held its form. It repeated, same timing, same spacing, like a pattern, like a message. And if that pattern truly came from beneath the Sahara, then the desert might be hiding something far more complex than anyone ever imagined. But this was only the beginning. The Sahara looks empty from above, just a giant sea of sand stretching farther than the eye can see. But beneath its surface, the desert hides layer after layer of forgotten history. Long before it became the hottest desert on Earth, this place was green. Rivers twisted through open plains. Animals roamed freely. People built homes, roads, and bright stone settlements. Over thousands of years, shifting climates and endless sandstorms swallowed everything they left behind. Today, most of that world is buried so deep that even satellites struggle to see it. That's why the strange vibration didn't make sense. Nothing this old should be sending out any kind of signal. Nothing buried this long should be moving at all. Yet the pattern kept repeating, as if coming from a structure or chamber far below the surface, something solid enough to echo. Scientists began to wonder if they were picking up hints of an ancient ruin, or maybe even parts of a lost city frozen in time. But before anyone could jump to conclusions, the signal changed again. It grew sharper, almost intentional, and that shift raised a question no one was ready to face. To understand the odd signal, the team turned to tools built to see beneath the Earth's surface. These weren't ordinary instruments. They were the kind used to map underground rock layers, find hidden water, and trace long-buried riverbeds. With them, researchers can read the desert like a giant X-ray. And when they focused everything on the location of the vibration, something unexpected appeared. A dark shape, wide, deep, sharp lines cutting through the sand where no natural lines should exist. But the strangest part wasn't the shape, it was the silence around it. Normally, underground cavities echo in certain ways, but this area gave off a controlled, steady pattern, almost like the signal was bouncing off walls that didn't belong to nature. The team pushed the scan further, layering heat maps over the vibration data. That's when a second shape emerged, rectangular, straight-edged, too perfect for shifting dunes or broken rock. It almost looked like part of a structure, buried far below where sunlight hasn't touched in ages. Whatever was down there wasn't small, and as the image grew clearer, so did the possibility that this wasn't a glitch, but a discovery. As the scans continued, more shapes began to appear beneath the desert floor. Not just random blobs or broken formations, but lines, straight lines, crossing each other at clean angles. Nature rarely builds right angles. Sand, wind, and heat create curves, waves, and slopes. But these lines held firm, forming grids and corners like pieces of something carefully planned. The team stared at the map in silence. If this was natural, it was unlike anything recorded in the region. One researcher compared the layout to old desert settlements once swallowed by shifting dunes. Another said the symmetry reminded him of walls or chambers. But the more they studied the strange network, the more one detail stood out. The vibration was strongest near the center of the grid, almost like something deep inside that formation was still active, or still resonating. The grid spread wider than expected too, far wider than a single room or small ruin. It stretched in all directions, as if part of a larger design, maybe even a complex, a system, or the faint trace of something that once stood proud above the sand. And then the vibration changed again. The team watched the monitors as the vibration shifted into a new rhythm, slower, then faster, then settling into a steady pulse again. It wasn't random. It wasn't unstable. It was controlled, almost like it was responding to something. But responding to what? There were no machines underground, no water pockets, no fault lines in that exact area. The Sahara is quiet at that depth, yet here was a pulse acting like it had a mind of its own. One scientist suggested it could be an echo from a collapsing chamber far below. Another thought it might be a strange pocket of compressed air shifting under pressure. But none of those ideas explained the pattern. Not the way it repeated with such clean timing. Not the way it lined up with the rectangular shapes on the scan. It was almost as if the signal was bouncing through a space with walls. Walls arranged in a way that once meant something. As if whatever was buried down there wasn't just old, it was designed. And if the vibration was interacting with that space, then maybe something deeper was still waiting to be found. But the next discovery would raise even more questions. At first, the second anomaly looked like a simple spike on the screen, just a small rise in the data, nothing unusual. But when the team zoomed in, the room fell silent. This new signal wasn't just near the first one, it was mirroring it, every pulse, every pause, every beat, as if the two signals were connected underground, echoing through the sand like parts of the same hidden system. Even more unsettling was its location. The second signal came from a spot where the scans showed a wide circular shape, far too smooth to be natural erosion. When both signals aligned, the vibration intensified, sweeping across the sensors with a force no one expected. It was almost like something underground was switching on, even though scientists knew that wasn't possible. Some thought it might be collapsed chambers linked by old passageways. Others whispered it could be a buried structure with rooms or tunnels that funneled the sound in perfect sync. But no explanation fit the pattern completely. The signals were too precise, too coordinated, too alive. And then, for the first time, the two pulses overlapped, and something new appeared in the scan. When the two pulses overlapped, the scanners picked up a third formation, one that hadn't shown up in any previous sweep. It rose from the data like a shadow taking form, slowly sharpening into something almost impossible. A long, curved outline buried deep beneath the sand. Not a circle, not a cave. Something more structured, almost like an arch or a massive entrance carved long ago. The team stared as the shape grew clearer. It was tall, wide, too even to be a natural hollow, and it stood exactly between the two vibration sources, as if linking them together. If the underground grid hinted at rooms or pathways, this new curve looked like the beginning of a gateway, a doorway into something larger. One researcher pointed out that ancient desert cultures sometimes built stone arches at the entrance of their settlements. Another argued that the shape might be part of an underground cavern system carved by ancient rivers. But no natural cavern would connect so perfectly with the strange pulse patterns. This wasn't random. This wasn't simple. It felt like the desert was revealing a piece of something bigger, just one piece of a puzzle, buried for thousands of years. And the next scan deepened the mystery even further. The team decided to push the scanners farther, digging deeper into the sand's hidden layers than any previous sweep. As the waves traveled down, the sensors began to pick up distortions, tiny bends in the signal, as if something far below was interfering with the scan. At first, they thought it was just the limits of the equipment, but then the distortions lined up, forming a faint outline beneath everything they had already mapped. This new shape didn't match the grid above it. It didn't match the arch. It didn't match the twin pulse patterns. It sat deeper, darker, and wider, almost like a floor or platform settled at the very base of the underground formation. And the vibration? It grew stronger the lower the scan went, gathering around this shape like metal pulled to a magnet. Some researchers wondered if they were seeing the remains of an ancient foundation, something massive enough to anchor an old settlement. Others believed it might be a collapsed chamber or tunnel system frozen in place. But one thing was certain: they were close to the source, closer than ever. And the scan had one final layer left to explore. The final scan pushed deeper than any before it. The instruments hummed, the screens flickered, and then a new image slowly appeared, one that made every researcher lean in. Beneath the arches, beneath the grid, beneath the twin pulses, something massive stretched across the lower layer of the desert floor. It wasn't in shape this time. It was a void, a huge, empty space carved into the rock itself, wide enough to rival underground caverns, but too precise, too clean, too intentional. And at the center of that void, the vibration was at its strongest, not fading, not scattering, focused, as if all the signals were pointing toward that single point. The deeper they scanned, the more the outline sharpened, sharp edges, smooth angles, a symmetry that nature rarely creates. One scientist whispered that this could be the entrance to a buried complex. Another said it looked like the roof of a giant chamber, waiting to collapse. But before anyone could decide, the signal changed one last time. The pulse didn't fade. It didn't multiply. It stopped completely. And when it did, something else started moving.